Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Heather McDougall. Did you know that roughly 2/3 of Americans are overweight or obese? So chances are that most of us have tried one diet or another, probably unsuccessfully. Dr. McDougall is with us here today to discuss our hunger drive, current weight loss treatments, why they don't work, and why a starch-based diet is the best meal plan for human health and ultimately weight loss. Hi, Dad. Dr. McDougall, thank you for being here.
Yeah, when you say most of us have tried a diet, I never did.
I did.
I was up to 228 pounds, which is, let's see, it's probably 80 to 90 pounds more than I weigh now. So I should have been on a diet, but I guess I just thought I was cute, pudgy. Anyway, it's, of course, been a great interest to most of the people that I've had a chance to get to know and have as my honored patients. So I'd like to talk to you about it from a whole different point of view today. I don't think you've ever heard a presentation similar to what I plan on giving you today. Let's go ahead and, for those of you who don't, well, let me just put this up. All right. Okay, for those of you who don't know me, I have a little bit of a bio that I'd like to share with you. I'm the co-founder of the McDougall program, which has been in existence for 36 years. And the second half of that co-founder part is my wife, Mary McDougall. And now I have to add Heather McDougall to this, and I do this with great pleasure. So there are three of us that share the McDougall program nowadays. I built a company back in the 1990s, which is still active today. In fact, our food products are in over 6,000 stores across the country. It's Dr. McDougall's Right Foods. And I'm really proud of that because consider it's been 30 years that these foods have been on the shelf. How many food products do you see on the shelf for 30 years? Been a big success. Co-founder of the McDougall Adventures, where we took people all over North and South America and Hawaii on adventure trips, probably about 30 different adventure trips. Co-author of 13 national best-selling books. And of course, you know that Mary McDougall was the co-author on that. And I guess what I'm most involved in these days is the fact that I'm the father of 3 children and the grandfather of 7 grandchildren. And of course, any of you who are grandparents know how big a part of your life that is. And things have changed in the past 50 years, me involved with the quote diet business. When I started out, it was Robert Atkins and the low-carb diets. He was what everybody was doing and trying was the low carbs. And, I couldn't see it. The science didn't support it. I happened to share my literary agent, a fellow by the name of Cohen, with Robert Atkins. We both had the same literary agents. And pretty soon after I started doing the tours and lecturing about the importance of a high carbohydrate, low fat diet, my agent came to me and said, I can't sell Atkins. Doesn't matter what I do. You're the guy that's on top right now. And that was pretty exciting, particularly as I had a great person to compare. He was making money from both of us at that time, just from me. And then in the 1980s, the McDougall program and other high-carb diets became very popular. And that lasted until the early 90s when my editor from Penguin Putnam came to me and she says, John, she says, you're going to have to change. You're going to have to stop preaching this high carbohydrate stuff because the trend is low-carb diets. And I told her, I said, my editor, I said, this cannot be true. The science is absolutely crystal clear that can't be the case. And I don't believe the public is that naive to fall back into these low-carb diets. And she said, well, even though you're 5% of the book sales for Penguin Putnam at that time, you're going to have to change. And I said, I refuse. And I refuse because I don't do this just for money. I really believe in this stuff and I take care of my patients. Well, she was right. And I was wrong because the Atkins came back. In fact, I'd have to say I shared the stage with Robert Atkins back in the year 2000. Well, we did the Great Nutrition Debate, which was broadcast all over the world. And then low carb took off again, became very popular, and Atkins had a resurgence. And he still does today, but there has been a takeover of the Atkins diet, which is the keto diets. But I have to tell you, folks, it's been a pendulum swinging back and forth over the last 50 years, but I can see the direction it's going in right now, and I feel really good about it. And the reason I feel good about it is because the access to information is so tremendous. 86% of people around the world have access to some kind of device, a phone or an iPad or a computer, so they can see the truth if they take the trouble to look. And I think the truth will win out, and information is going to be the key. And when it comes to information, I want you to pay attention to the right-hand side of this slide. This is an information source for you. It's where you can get knowledge. It is not, well, I wouldn't say it's illegal, but it's not in favor of the book publishing companies, the magazine or article publishing companies, because they make money off of the scientific articles. Scientific articles, which, by the way, were paid for by your tax and your consumer dollars. You paid for them. And they sell them for $30 to $40 an article. Well, if you take the trouble to look at this website, which is Sci-Hub, you could get almost all of the articles, almost all the scientific articles, dated back to maybe 100 years. It's a tremendous resource. I use it all the time. So I would encourage you to look up the information that you hear from anyone, and particularly me. I pride myself in not exaggerating, and I pride myself in telling you the truth. And I would love to have a challenge if I fell short of your expectations. I would certainly try and fix it. It's not that I don't make mistakes, but I'm certainly up to getting the truth in an appropriate manner to you. So you can help by taking the trouble to look up the research that particularly interests you. And in most of the slides that I provide, I offer the scientific references down in the right-hand corner, so you can look it up. Hunger. We're going to talk about hunger. The whole focus of this presentation is about hunger. I don't think anybody has given you such a presentation in the past. This is an unbeatable friend. I know lots of you think of it as your enemy, but it's not. And we're going to talk about the way people deal with hunger, which are diets and drugs and surgeries, and they fail. I'm going to show you why. Some things I'd like to share with you about hunger. Hunger is a blinding drive for survival. It reminds us that food should be sought and eaten, and it's a losing battle for 80% of people. Those are the ones that are overweight and obese. And my plea to you is to give in to hunger to win the battle of the bulge. And hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll see it that way too. It's much easier to do the right thing. It's much easier to comply with the rules of nature. But before we go on, I want to take a couple more statements about hunger. When you're hungry, you can't think about anything else. A hungry person only sees food. And that's where I'd like to start out with this presentation. About hungry people only see food. During World War II in Western Europe, people were starving by the millions. And as a result, there was a lot of suffering going on, a lot of death. And people did whatever they could to stay alive. And that was being hungry most of the time and getting whatever foods they could commonly get at that time. And so it happens that the foods that they provided for their nutrition, even though they were scarce, were the same foods that we recommend today for you to eat, not in scarcity. Foods like potatoes and wheat and various kinds of vegetables and fruits. They even ate, and it may surprise you, they even ate tulip bulbs. But a tulip bulb is an underground storage organ, just like a potato or other roots or bulbs or corms. They're underground storage organs. So that would be a logical place for them to look for food. Well, because of the starvation, the hunger that was going on, it affected everyone in the world, and particularly those who were in the midst of war. It was decided by an investigator that, and his name is Ansel Keys, that we should do an experiment and learn about hunger. And so they put on an advertisement. The advertisement stated, will you starve that they may be better fed. Speaking about the people in Europe, they want to study what hunger was all about so that people who are starving around the world in the past, present, and likely future would understand more about this drive and how to deal with it. So Ansel Keys, who made the cover of Time magazine, you may have heard about him in terms of K rations or in terms of the Mediterranean diet. His work was the foundation of the Mediterranean diet. And what he did is he put out an advertisement. He got 400 volunteers. And it turned out that most of them were conscientious objectors, people who didn't want to fight the battle, but they didn't want to miss the war either. They wanted to contribute. So he found 36 conscientious objectors who would volunteer for this very difficult experiment. And that's the Minnesota starvation experiment, which was done in Minnesota. And they published a paper, The Psychology of Hunger. It was an 11-month experiment. And the men their goal was to lose 25% of their normal body weight. 25% of their normal body weight, and they did. In fact, some of them lost as much as 35% of their body weight. So this is the way the program was set up. For the first 3 months, they were on a full-fed diet. They were consuming over 3,000 calories a day, which is all they basically wanted to eat. And then they went on a 6-month period of semi-starvation. They dropped their calorie intake in half to about 1,570 calories a day. Now, it's important that we point out this is semi-starvation. This isn't full starvation. It isn't a situation where you'd go into ketosis and lose your hunger drive, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But it was enough calories, enough carbohydrate, so that hunger was real and painful. So they went on that kind of diet for about 6 months, and then they went back to eating a considerable amount of food. And they took 12 of these subjects, these conscientious objectors, and they gave them unrestricted access to food. They could eat as much as they wanted. So the kinds of foods that they ate during the Minnesota starvation experiment were the kind of foods that we recommend. They ate potatoes and turnips and breads and pastas and various kinds of vegetables. A hungry person sees only food. 11 months of hunger. Let me take the trouble to read some of the statements that come out of The Psychology of Hunger, out of Ansel Keys' work. Food and eating became focal points in conversation, reading, dreams, and even daydreams. Food is the only thing I could think about all day long and even into the night. Men watched movies about food, developed reading habits. They looked at recipe books and cookbooks. They guarded their food defensively with their elbows. They sat at the dinner table and guarded their plate. They were so focused. They would eat the last crumb and they would lick their plates in the dining room. And they got upset. There were other people eating in the dining room, and they got upset with non-participants because they wasted food. Some of the habits that they developed is they rapidly chewed 2 to 3 sticks of gum at a time until their mouths were sore, because it would at least give them some distraction from this constant hunger. Hungry people see only food. The men collected food items, and some even rummaged through the garbage to find food. You can see how desperate they were. They started toying with the food, cutting it into small pieces, just enjoying every single morsel of food. They increased the use of spices and salt to add flavors to their meals, and it became socially isolating from them. They became isolated from even the other 35 members among the conscientious objectors that were part of the experiment. One man chopped 3 of his fingers off just so he could get out of the experiment. That's how distressing it was. Volunteers felt a decreased sex drive. All interest in women and dating was lost. Symptoms of anxiety and depression became common. They had gastrointestinal discomfort, dizziness, headaches, decrease in need of sleep, extreme tiredness, cold intolerance, muscle soreness, are all the things that they suffered physically. They had physical changes that you could see, like sunken face and bellies, and lost their hair. They had protruding rims, as you could see from the pictures, and edema, swollen legs and faces. And some lost 50 pounds or 33% of their body weight. For 11 months, they went through this, 6 months of semi-starvation. Interesting, when they finished the experiment, one of the first foods they went for, and even during the experiment, was potatoes. Potatoes are found to be the most satisfying of all foods. In this particular study, they noted that fat is very unsatisfying, and make this statement. They say this high-fat hyperphagia, in other words, eating a lot of high-fat food, appears to be largely due to an inability of the body to rapidly detect the high energy density of fatty foods. And what we're going to talk about over the next couple of minutes is that it's carbohydrate. And you, of course, that potatoes, rice, corn, and breads, and so on are high carbohydrate. They're 80 to 90% carbohydrate. And that's where you get satisfaction from, is carbohydrate, not from fat. The body doesn't hardly notice fat. The classic interesting thing that happened when these people, these 36 conscious objectors, ended the experiment is 12 of them they allowed to eat food unrestricted for eight weeks, for 2 months. And what happened to them is they overate, hyperphagia, and something occurred called the overshot phenomena, where they gained 10% more weight than they originally started out with before they went on the experiment. And this hyperphagia, this overshoot phenomena, only stopped, their hyperphagia only stopped when they were free fat mass. Free fat mass, just replacing the body fat, was kept eating and eating and eating until they restored the organs of the body. Likewise, they could restore proteins and vitamins and minerals, and it didn't stop their hyperphagia. They still overate. Now, the reason this applies to you and you want to know about this is the reason people can write books like Why Diets Make Us Fat. It's because of this overshoot phenomena, this hyperphagia that occurs. And you can see from the chart here, they started out at their original weight of, that's 100%. And they went through the experiment and they dropped a whole bunch of body fat. And but they also lost some of the tissue in their organs and some of the fat in their organs. And you can see that by the red line. Well, these 12 individuals who were allowed unlimited access to foods, you can see that they overshot they overshot their original weight, and they gained way up here. And so what some of these books will tell you, and it's true, is if you diet because you fear another starvation, another famine, somehow your body detects that it has to prepare itself for the future and put on a lot of extra body fat. So in that way, 80 to 95% of dieters fail. Satisfying hunger. You want to do it naturally as intended to satisfy hunger. And foods that satisfy hunger are starches, vegetables, and fruits. Sugars. And the best way to satisfy your hunger in a healthy manner is to eat these sugars in the form of starches. When I talk about sugars, I'm almost always talking about potatoes and sweet potatoes and corn and rice. Sometimes fruits, but almost never am I talking about, unless I qualify so, I'm almost never talking about table sugar, white sugar, the kind of simple sugar that you may know as sugar. So, allow me this potential misunderstanding. When I say sugar, I mean starch, rice, corn, potatoes, sweet potatoes, pastas, etc. The classic experiments done by Bundell, what he did is he fed his subjects diets either high in sugar, white sugar, or in cream. And then what he did, you look over on the left-hand side here, is he asked the people, how do you feel? Here's the chart down here: extremely hungry, semi-satisfied, satisfied, extremely full. He asked the subjects to rate their satiety. And what you see here is that on a high-fat diet, their satiety rating remained high over the 4 hours after they ate. Whereas when they ate carbohydrate, which is the dotted line, high carbohydrate foods, they satisfied their hunger drive. That's one of the ways that experiments have been done, is by getting together a group of people and feeding them various kinds of foods and then asking them how you feel afterwards. Another way that experiments were done that determined that carbohydrate satisfies hunger drive and fat doesn't is they would feed people meals, breakfasts in this case, and then what they do is after the meal, they'd feed them a snack and they see how much of the snack they ate. Well, if they weren't satisfied with the meal, then they ate a large snack. And if they were satisfied, they ate a small snack. So you see here in this second phase of the experiment, the second box here, is you see on a normal breakfast, they have a reasonable snack. On high-fat breakfast, you see that they eat a large snack, whereas on the high-carbohydrate breakfast, because their appetite was satisfied by the meal that was high in carbohydrate, they ate a smaller snack. Statements that come out of this research paper is carbohydrate supplement at breakfast suppressed appetite 90 minutes later. Fat supplement produced no detectable action on measures of appetite at any point. What they're telling you is that if you want to be satisfied, if you want to give into that hunger drive, what you do is you eat high carbohydrate foods, starches primarily. Obese volunteers consume twice as much energy from fatty items, thereby indicating a weak action of fat for satisfaction. So when you eat meals full of fat, you hardly even notice. The body doesn't react to it. You don't satisfy the hunger drive. As a result, you keep eating. And some people eat to the point where they gain an extra 2, 3, 4, 500 pounds of fat because their meals are made very, very high in fat. And they have some other issues going on. But the point I want to get across to you is one that should be loud and clear. It's carbohydrate, sugar, that satisfies your hunger drive. And your body hardly even notices when you eat fat. Another really important experiment is they took a group of people and they put them in a metabolic ward. And then what they did is they fed them hidden fats, where the meals prepared were 45% to 15% fat. And as a result of feeding them foods such as soups and muffins and stews and breads, where they could hide the fat in the food, they ended up unknowingly consuming these fats and an extra amount of calories, an extra 600 calories a day by eating a high-fat diet. Let's take a look at the chart over here. You see when they fed them a high-fat meal, they're down 45 to 50% fat, and they let them eat as much as they want. And of course, they couldn't tell the fat content of the foods. Unconsciously, they ate the food. So they just passively ate the food, and as a result, they consumed 2,700 calories. When they cut the fat intake down a bit, say 30 to 35% fat, they consumed 300 calories less. And then when they cut the fat intake down to 15 to 20%, they consumed 600 calories less. They didn't even notice. Now, the McDougall diet is about 7% fat. So this gives you some idea of the kind of effect you can get by taking fat out of your food. And they note that you have to eat the carbohydrate. Not only is it the fat you eat, it's the fat you wear, but it's carbohydrate that satisfies the hunger drive and lets you consume smaller amounts. The conclusion, these results suggest that habitual, unrestricted consumption of low-fat diets may be an effective approach to weight control. Low-fat, high carbohydrate. It's usually one or the other. If you have a high-fat diet, it's low in carbohydrate. If you have a low-fat diet, it's high in carbohydrate. You have to get calories from someplace. The McDougall diet, and you've probably seen these before, but these are stomachs that I've carried around the world to try and demonstrate to people what the effect of food is on filling their stomach and their body. If you fill the stomach with with butter or oil or salad dressing, you end up barely filling the stomach because fat is 9 calories per gram. So you see over there on the left-hand side, the beaker, which is about the size of your stomach, which represents 500 calories of food. The physical effects, the local effects on your stomach are a very tiny amount of filling. Now take a look at the cheese and then the meat. You find you fill the stomach about a third of the way. Still, you're left ravenously hungry. You have to get over to rice, which is 1 calorie per gram. The meat and dairy is about 4 calories per gram. Oh, 1 calorie per gram of corn is 1 calorie per gram, or potatoes even fewer, 0.6 calories per gram. And you can see the different physical filling effect of different kinds of foods to get 500 calories. Each of these beakers contains 500 calories. And so you have to overfill the stomach to get 500 calories of potatoes in it. This is a local effect. This is a matter of occupying space in the stomach. It's a matter of filling you up. But you don't stay satisfied just by filling the stomach. Maybe some of you had experiences of taking in high fiber supplements. You know, that was a rage in the past. You fill your stomach with these high fiber, no calories supplements, and you get full, but then you're hungry. You're hungry immediately. You stay hungry because you haven't gone on to the second and final step of satisfying the hunger drive, which is with carbohydrates. Carbohydrates satisfy the hunger drive. Without enough carbohydrate, you leave the table hungry. And that creates some problems. You can't understand it. You sat down, you ate a plate of food, you should be full, but you're not. So you go back and you get another plate of food because you haven't had this satisfying effect of carbohydrate. Your plate was filled with meat and cheese and oil. No carbohydrate, but you ate it, a whole plate. So you say to yourself, well, maybe I should get another plate of food. And you do that, you get another plate of low carbohydrate, high fat food, meat, dairy, oils, etc. And you notice something happening. Your stomach's getting a little bit physically full, a little bit distended, but you're still ravenously hungry. You could eat the paint off the refrigerator. And you just go back and you eat a third big plate of meat and dairy and oil and so on. And you stuff yourself to the point where you're in pain, till where the filling has gotten to the point where you're in discomfort. And then you have the signals that it's time to stop eating because you haven't gotten the systemic effect of carbohydrate on satisfying your hunger drive. And this can result in all kinds of problems for you. Mainly, people think that there's something psychologically wrong with them. They say to themselves, look, I ate, I'm still hungry. There must be something wrong with me or my hunger drive. I'm an obsessive compulsive overeater, you say to yourself. Or maybe I should see a psychiatrist who will tell me I have an eating disorder. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a psychiatric problem. This is a brain problem in the sense that your brain is not being fed with what it needs to be satisfied. Carbohydrate satisfies the hunger drive. And it's a systemic effect that takes place, not just filling the stomach with bulk. I want to talk to you about the set point theory for satisfying hunger. A set point is a stable condition. It's how you adjust to the environment that's around you. For example, if you're living in a tobacco-filled, smoky environment, you develop a set point in your condition where you probably lose a little weight because of the tobacco. You cough and you wheeze because of the smoke. And you adjust to your environment. That's your standard set point because that's your environment. So a set point when it comes to food, it preserves your image. You don't want yourself looking different to your friends and relatives every time you see them. They could recognize you as the overweight person who's collecting money at St. Helena Hospital in the accounting department, or the trim secretary that's working in an office. You get used to these people, and by having a set point or a stable condition, you preserve your image. Unfortunately, the current belief is that set point is determined by your genes. It's hardwired into your body. You can't change it. Again, you're blamed for the problem. You have a set point, which makes you either overweight or trim or normal or whatever. Let's talk about people with set points. Taking you back a ways, let's look at Katharine Hepburn. Through her whole life, she was the same physical appearance, trim, healthy-looking person. She was never hungry. She ate as much food as she wanted. I assume she ate the right kind of foods. Jackie Gleason, he had a set point such that his caricature was of an overweight or maybe obese man. Starred in television. Alfred Hitchcock, somebody else that you could remember. Again, a caricature of an obese, overweight man. That was his set point. And he was never hungry. He ate as much of his kind of food as he wanted. Barack Obama. Barack Obama is considered a trim, healthy man. And his position on being a vegan, by the way, was stated in 2008 when he was campaigning as a senator. And I had a chance to do an interview that some of you might be, well, it wasn't an interview. I had a chance to meet Barry Obama at Punahou High School. And if you want to hear about that interaction or read about that interaction and know why he knows how to eat healthy, and his wife, Michelle, eats a vegan diet, is at least in part because of the experience I had with him about 30, 40 years ago at Punahou High School. I was one of his teachers. Set point, our 45th president, he has a set point, and he's notorious for the kind of foods he chooses. 244 pounds, 6'3", which would put him in a category of seriously overweight, if not obese. Some of the current figures have set points that you would certainly be unhappy with if they changed the way they looked, like Taylor Swift, who, by the way, in this picture is drinking a Coke, and she says she exercises a lot, and that helps her with her set point. And then we have Lizzo. Lizzo is famous for the fact that she is obese, but she's trying to get healthier. She knows the importance of a vegan diet. She says, a shout out to all my fat vegans. Look as good as we feel. And it's noted that Lizzo likes Dr. McDougall's miso soup. But it's been a struggle for her. And certainly we'd hope that we have a chance to change her set point. These animals, they're never hungry. You know, as long as there's sufficient food available, they're never hungry, and none of them are overweight. Naturally, they don't become overweight because they eat the foods that are intended for their specific animal species. Well, if you change the kind of food and the animal is never hungry and eats as much as it wants, if you feed them table scraps, they change their set point, their physical appearance. But it's because they changed the food, because you fed them table scraps. Royalty of the past, which I talk about a lot. It's the royalty, the rich people of the past who are the ones that are overweight, obese, sick, because they have access to this rich food. Whereas the person who works for them, people who toil in the fields, build the pyramids, they live on starches. But the royalty, the aristocrats, they take the starches and they feed them to pheasants and sheep and cows and pigs. Then they eat those animals. And pretty much rich people have been known as being people who are overweight. Even in the world today, it is in high-income countries where obesity is most prevalent. But that's changing. And the consequence of this is not just obesity, it's heart disease and cancer and diabetes and all kinds of ailments. People try and change their set point in various ways. One way is to exercise. You can exercise, never be hungry, and lose weight. But once you stop exercising, you'll gain the weight. So there's a way to change your physical set point and change the way you look. And as long as you keep it up as a pretty much daily activity, you're going to maintain that set point of a trim, healthy-looking person. The other way, in the way that I'm promoting to you, because it's effortless and painless and something you have to do anyway. You know, with exercise, you've got to put out the running shoes. You've got to make a decision. And it's often one that's difficult for you to get out there and put that mile or 2 or 3 or 10 in. But when it comes to food, there's no decision to be made. You've got to eat. That hunger drive insists. The decision comes as to what you're going to eat. Are you going to eat foods that are high in fat? Or are you going to eat foods that are high in carbohydrate? If you make the change, then you will change your set point. You'll change the way you appear permanently, and you never have to be hungry. Let's talk about various ways of losing weight. Would people try and change the set point? As I pointed out to you, dieting is fraught with failure. 80 to 90% and maybe 95% of people who go on a calorie-restricted, a portion-controlled diet, they're in pain because hunger hurts. And as a result, they can't stand the pain and they regain the lost weight. People have told me they're so hungry, they lick the paint off the refrigerator trying to get to the food. And you're never going to get used to being hungry. I can tell you after interviewing patients for more than 50 years is that as you get older, it still hurts to be hungry. You can practice as much as you want. And I've taken care of a lot of people who practice dieting. They're almost professional dieters, and it never stops hurting. Let's talk about some of the ways that people have tried to make hunger less painful, to make eating less food less painful. These are people who were a part of my early practice in the sense that there were many people following these kinds of diets back in the 70s and 80s. There's a guy named Horace Fletcher. He's called the Great Masticator. And what he asks you to do is to chew your food 32 times. Why 32 times? Well, there are 32 teeth. But actually, people who followed Fletcherism or Fletcherization would chew their food 50 to 100 times a day until it turned into liquid, until it swallowed itself. That was the way that he thought that being on a low food diet would be less tolerable. And there is actually scientific experiments, the one that I cite here for you, that shows that people who chew more thoroughly decrease their weight. So there's some real value to what he has to say. And it became a very popular approach. The Hollywood grapefruit diet. And this is where they had you on a very restricted diet. It was low in calories. The key was the fact that it was a calorie-restricted diet. It was popular in the 1930s. You got to have half a grapefruit, some toast for breakfast, 6 slices of cucumber for lunch, half a grapefruit, 2 eggs, lettuce, and a tomato for dinner. 800 calories a day. And somehow eating this grapefruit diet was supposed to make the pain of hunger less. It didn't. Dieting means hunger. That's why people didn't stay on this program either. There have been many kinds of diets out there, and you've had some experience with some of them. They're popular today, such as Jenny Craig or Overeaters Anonymous and Weight Watchers and Nutrisystem. These are diet programs that each and every one of them ask you to eat fewer calories, less food. And in some cases, they supply the food for you. And in other cases, you have to fend for yourself. Overeaters Anonymous, you can be on whatever kind of diet you want. You just have to attend meetings that offer mutual support, like Alcoholics Anonymous does. Jenny Craig, Weight Watchers, and Nutrisystems are the popular diets today, but their magic is in the fact that they ask you to eat less than you'd like. In fact, you're eating about the same number of calories that these 36 conscientious objectors ate when they went through their 6 months of semi-starvation. About 1,500 calories a day is average.
Oh, you muted your mic. We can't hear you.
All right, how much of it do you miss? Just what I started about the
Oh,
breath
just
area?
a couple seconds. Yeah.
Okay. This is a true story. When I was in Hawaii, there was a fellow by the name of Wiley Brooks, became worldwide famous. He said that he could live on air alone, didn't have to eat at all. And this belief stems from some Buddhist and Hindu beliefs. And so he got newspaper articles written about him. He held lectures, charged you $10 a lecture or $100 a seminar, and you learn to survive without any food at all, being a breatharian. Well, the thing that happened, it appeared in our newspaper when I was living there, is that this breatharian got caught going to 7-Eleven, buying cookies, candy bars, and donuts. His girlfriend turned him in. You can't be a breatharian. Let's talk about some of the things that you can do to distract from your hunger drive. And some of them are true, some of them aren't. Some of them have value, and some of them are worth a waste of time. Drinking Coke.
This was me 5 years ago, and it's still me. Because I confess I'm a waistline watcher from way back. Well, that's enough for today. Now for a lively lift. Ice-cold Coca-Cola. There's no waistline worry with Coke, Actually, this individual-sized bottle has no more calories than half a grapefruit. Another thing, the cold, crisp taste of Coke is so satisfying, it keeps me from eating something else that might really add those pounds. Coke's a natural, wholesome blending of pure food flavors. I guess that's why everyone likes the refreshing new feeling you get, only from not-too-sweet Coca-Cola. And no wonder. Lively, lifty Coca-Cola provides a welcome bit of quick energy between meals. Makes for a pleasant...
I guess it's not a technologically well-sound day. I'm sorry, Heather.
This was me 5 years ago, and it's still me. Because I confess I'm a waistline watcher from way back.
I'll just keep my hands off my keyboard and I'll be okay.
This was me 5 years ago, and it's still me. Because I confess I'm a waistline watcher from way back. Well, that's enough for today. Now for a lively lift. Ice-cold Coca-Cola. There's no waistline worry with Coke, Actually, this individual-sized bottle has no more calories than half a grapefruit. Another thing, the cold, crisp taste of Coke is so satisfying, it keeps me from eating something else that might really add those pounds. Coke's a natural, wholesome blending of pure food flavors. I guess that's why everyone likes the refreshing new feeling you get, only from not-too-sweet Coca-Cola. And no wonder. Lively, lifty Coca-Cola provides a welcome bit of quick energy between meals. Makes for a pleasant pause in a busy day. Oh, and remember, Coke is low in calories, too. Say, now, don't you get any thinner.
There's a lot of truth to what Connie's saying there. If you compare Coke, say, to a glass of milk, milk's 50% fat. Coke is virtually no fat. Milk has more calories than Coca-Cola has. And Coca-Cola has the carbohydrate calories that satisfy the hunger drive. As we've talked about, fat does not satisfy hunger drives. So you're better off drinking a Coca-Cola than a glass of milk. And I really mean it. We had the Master Cleanser Lemonade diet, and that was the Stanley Burroughs diet. And somehow or another, a mixture of lemon juice, maple syrup, water, and cayenne pepper 6 times a day for at least 10 days was a way of distracting you from being hungry. Didn't work. Still hungry. There was a very popular program. I guess it was to make the low-calorie diet seem more medically sound. In fact, your mother, Heather, actually worked in a doctor's office where they gave these HCG shots. These are human chorionic gonadotropin, which is a hormone that occurs during pregnancy. And they take this hormone, synthesize it in large amounts in the laboratory. And the patients in this doctor's office would come in, once or twice a week, and your mother would give them an injection of HCG. And the reason the program worked is not because the HCG was completely useless, but it gave them a way of distracting from the pain of the 500-calorie diet that they were put on. When it comes to losing weight and smoking, there's a lot of belief out there. And again, it's true, in part, that smoking cigarettes is a way to be trim. When you smoke cigarettes, what the tobacco does is it diminishes your hunger drive. And this was a time in history during the early 20s when people were becoming liberated, particularly women. And it became not only socially acceptable, but popular for women to smoke cigarettes back in the 1920s. And part of the pitch to the women is if you want to look good, you want to have a trim figure, is cigarettes will help you to accomplish this. It'll take your mind off of the pain of hunger. Coffee. Now, coffee increases metabolism, and so you burn more calories. That's true. But also, the caffeine depresses the hunger drive by changing various hormones. And so that would have a similar effect to the Coca-Cola we just talked about. Is a cup of coffee would also have similar hormone changing effects that are related to whether you're hungry or not, or the intensity of your hunger drive. All right, let's talk about a more serious way of reducing that hunger drive. And that's with the currently popular carnivore, keto, and low carbohydrate Atkins diets. To go into ketosis, you have to consume fewer than 50 grams of carbohydrate. It's carbohydrate that's important. The amount of carbohydrate is the key factor to determine whether you go into a state of ketosis or not. That's 200 calories of carbohydrate. I mean, consider you might eat 2,000 calories a day. That means less than 1/10 of your diet. If you're on a 2,000 calorie diet, 1/10 of your diet can be carbohydrate, hardly any at all. You have to stay on this very carbohydrate restricted diet for 2 to 4 days before you go into ketosis. And this was why it was important for me to point out to you that the men in the Minnesota hunger experiment, starvation experiment, they weren't on a keto producing diet. They were on a semi-starvation diet. They had plenty of carbohydrate so that their hunger drive was very powerful, eating 1,500 calories a day and plenty of carbohydrate to keep you out of ketosis. These diets take it one step further. They so severely restrict the amount of carbohydrate in your diet that you become sick. Low-carb diets. One of the more popular diets, again, as I grew up in my medical business, was the Last Chance diet by Dr. Roger Lynn in the 1970s. Less than 400 calories per serving of liquid protein. And this protein concoction that you bought was made from slaughterhouse byproducts, like the horns and hooves and hides and tendons and bones of animals. They ground them up and put them in a bottle and sold them to people. And somewhere between 2 and 4 million people have tried this kind of a diet. It puts you into a state of sickness, into ketosis. This particular mixture, which goes under the name Prolin, was banned after it killed 58 people. The origin of the Atkins type of diet, the low-carb diet, the make yourself sick diet, is by Dr. Banting, who was a funeral home owner back in the 1800s. And he published a letter on corpulence. And what he'd done is he went on this very low carbohydrate, predecessor of the Atkins kind of diet. And he ended up losing 35 pounds during the first year and, almost 60 pounds during his lifetime. And he initially popularized the Atkins type of diet as you know it. This was back in the 1800s. You are I'm sure you're very familiar with the Atkins kind of diet. And now these days, the keto diets was just a different rearrangement of the Atkins diet. But what's most important for you to understand is the key to these kinds of diets is to put you into a state of ketosis. Grain Brain is another one of those diets. The Barry Sears diet is another one of those diets. They worship ketosis. They consider this a state of bliss to go into ketosis. Well, what happens is this. Your body loves to burn sugar. Glycolysis, it's called. So as long as you have enough sugar in your diet, that's what's going to preferentially burn. But if you don't add any carbohydrate, sugar, to your diet, you restrict it to, say, less than 400 calories a day, or 200 grams, let's say 200 calories a day, 50 grams of carbohydrate. As long as you're restricted to that point, the body doesn't have enough sugar to run the machinery, to keep the brain going. The brain burns carbohydrate, and it takes 20% of the energy that you eat every day just to keep the brain going. And then there are certain tissues in your body that will only burn carbohydrate, like your red blood cells. They'll only burn carbohydrate as an energy source. Same thing with some of the cells in your kidney tubules. They only burn carbohydrate. But the brain will also burn some fat under desperate situations. So what you do is you restrict the carbohydrate to the point where the body has to, in desperation, look for other sources of energy. And the other source of energy that's available is fat. When you burn fat, it breaks down into ketones. Maybe the best way you can relate to this is the smell of acetone. It breaks down into ketones. And by the way, you can smell the ketone breath on people who are on these kinds of diets. Ketones creates a state of ketosis. Ketosis suppresses the hunger drive. Now, it does it on these kinds of diets unnaturally, but there are a couple of circumstances where it's valuable to to go into a state of ketosis. For example, if you're starving to death, really, it takes 60 days to starve to death. So if you're starving to death, the pain of hunger is severe and fully encompassing. It's the only thing a hungry person sees is food. So for the first 2 or 3 days or 4 days, you suffer terribly the pain of hunger. That's all you can think about is hunger. But then you go into a state of ketosis, and you have the rest of the time that you're alive to figure out how to get yourself out of trouble, how to find food. The other circumstance that ketosis occurs in is when you get really sick, like a real bad flu, you'll go into ketosis. Now, the reason you go into ketosis when you're really ill, say you have a chronic cancer or a chronic heart failure or bad flu or an infection, is because when you get sick, you're supposed to be recuperating. You're not supposed to be gathering and preparing food. You're supposed to be recuperating. And so in a natural state, you go into ketosis. So this is one of the reasons I call the keto diets or the Atkins diet the make yourself sick diets, because what they do is they emulate sickness. Not only do they do that in an acute state over a few days or weeks or months, but they do that for a lifetime, over years. They give you illnesses that are related to diet, not just related, causally related to diet, like cancer and heart disease and diabetes and obesity and kidney failure. These are make yourself sick diets because they feed you the very foods that cause you to lose weight are the very foods that cause end organ damage to your heart and your liver and your brain. The make yourself sick diets. I wrote about these make yourself sick diets. I was published in Mayo Clinic Proceedings. There was a group of doctors who wrote an article about how successful keto diets were, not just in losing weight, but they pointed out that when you're on a keto diet, what happens is your blood pressure comes down, your blood sugar gets better, your cholesterol drops on these low-carb diets. And it's true. In any way that you lose weight, you have improvement in things like cholesterol, triglycerides, blood sugar, blood pressure, etc. Just goes along with the weight loss. But I pointed out to them in this letter to the editor, and I'm still waiting for a response. I pointed out to them, this would be similar to what happens when people undergo cancer chemotherapy. When you undergo cancer chemotherapy, you become ill. And you don't eat. And you lose weight. And your blood pressure comes down. Your blood sugar comes down. Your triglycerides, your cholesterol are reduced. But what doctor would brag about a weight loss program based on cancer chemotherapy, I asked? The other thing I want to point out to you, and I mentioned a couple of slides ago, is that these diets are dangerous when it comes to chronic illnesses. There have been 4 major reviews, only 4 done to date, that looked at the health effects and the risk of dying of heart disease when you follow these low-carb diets. And these 4 reviews tell you the same thing. You increase your risk of dying overall, and you increase your risk of heart disease by following low-carb diets. No exceptions. When it comes to high carbohydrate diets, like I've tried to teach you, there are no papers that show such. In fact, the scientific research is very clear that when you follow the kind of diet that I recommend, you prolong longevity. You decrease your risk of dying of heart disease, if not eliminate it. They're the make yourself sick diets, not only immediately, but long-term. Now, there's a version of the make yourself sick diet that, again, became popular during my medical career that I want to talk to you about. And these are the hospital-based diets. Hospitals, including the ones that I worked at, they had a division. Why? Because it made money. Not only did they have a surgery unit, and an internal medicine unit, and maybe a diabetic ward, but they had a division of the hospital that sold these very dangerous liquid protein diets like OptiFast, supported by doctors. SlimFast, MedFast, Slender Now, OptiFast. These are various programs that you may have heard about that have terrible side effects. They make you sick. 95% of the people who are on these diets can't stay sick forever, so they go off them, and they regain their weight. And by the way, insurance companies never bought into this. They never paid for these kinds of diets. Let's talk about for a minute. Remember, we're getting back to that hunger drive. That drive that is going to constantly be at presence with you. It's never going to let you alone. You're going to seek food. But ways to temper that drive, to depress it, to somehow make it more tolerable, have been various kinds of drugs. And these drugs have been, a couple of kinds of drugs. We have the traditionally popular drugs that are still paid for, are still approved by the FDA and still on the market. Your doctor can prescribe them. They are drugs that are based on amphetamine, and they suppress the appetite. Here's a few of them. Or they're based on drugs that have narcotic effects. In other words, opioid-like drugs. So again, they reduce the pain of hunger. And there are a few of them that I've listed up here that are FDA approved. But there are some of these drugs that have been banned, like fen-phen and amphetamines. They suppress the hunger drive, but they also carry a burden of having an increased risk of heart disease and dying, and having cardiac valve disease, which is what fen-phen was known for, is people who develop problems with their heart valves. The effects of these kinds of pills, and then the second category of pills that I listed up there, we're going to get into, which are the GLP-1 agonists. We'll talk about those in a minute. If you take a look at these various kinds of pills, you'll see the weight loss that you accomplish within 12 months. Maybe 3, 4, 5, 6% of your weight you'll lose by taking these medications, and they cost. The cost per month is $170 to $1,000 a month for these kinds of drugs. Well, let's just say they're $170 to $500. until you get into the GLP-1 agonists, which we're going to talk about. So they're very expensive. The results are well, let's just say they're minimal. They're not even modest as far as weight loss, and people don't stay on them because of the side effects and because the benefits are so little. The other category, FDA-approved drugs, which have been really popular over the last 4 to 10 years, are the GLP-1 agonists. You hear a lot about these, and these I want to spend a little bit of time on. The ones that are approved for drugs are the semaglutide category of pills, and they come in shots, in the form of shots, and also tablets that you can take. And what they're supposed to do is they're supposed to decrease gastric emptying. In other words, the food stays longer in your stomach. They're also supposed to change hormones that lead to satiety. And in that way, they're supposed to cause weight loss. But the truth of the matter is these drugs have an effect that's quite obvious that I'd like to talk to you about in some detail. The drugs are derived from the venom in the lower jaw of the Gila monster that lives in states like Nevada in the Southwest United States. This is a very toxic venom, and it's as toxic as a Western diamondback rattlesnake. But they deliver such a slow dose that it rarely, if ever, has killed people. It makes them really sick. With the bite, you have swelling, intense burning, vomiting, dizziness, weakness, rapid heartbeat, faintness, excessive perspiration, chills and fever. All the signs and symptoms of being poisoned. So, that's the origin of the drugs that we're going to talk about over the next few minutes, is thanks to the Gila monster, Southwest United States, we have a whole new class of weight-losing drugs. Here are the medications. There's their popular names, like Ozempic and Wegovy and Rybelsus and Saxenda and Victoza. You see these advertised all day long on your cable channels. If you see them advertised all day long on the cable channels, what does that tell you? These are very, very profitable drugs. And they result in a significant amount of weight loss, up to 16% of your original body weight you get with the semaglutides, and 6.4% with the liraglutides. But the way they accomplish it is by making you sick. Gastrointestinal adverse effects occur in 84% of people on the semaglutides and 83% of the people on the liraglutides. That's the way they work. Because you're too sick to eat because you're suffering from Gila monster poison. Desired side effects. In other words, what you should expect, the reason that they work, and what your doctors are looking forward to is you develop, or they should be, because this is what's happening, nausea, diarrhea, decreased appetite, vomiting, constipation, indigestion, stomach pain, bloating, and reported. This is people who are sick enough to report it to the investigators. Reported as many as half the patients. And the more powerful the drug, the more the people develop nausea and vomiting. There's a direct correlation between the potency of the medication and how sick you get. Now, these are people that are just reporting to the investigators that they're nauseated. These are people who are sick enough to bring it to their attention. How about the other half of people who may not know why they feel bad, but they do? They may not experience actual vomiting. It's not that bad, but it's still there. It's still intense enough, the feelings, for them to have a depressed appetite. Anyway, there are also some very serious adverse effects that they advertise in the last 90 seconds of the commercials on TV. They tell you about how these drugs can cause pancreatitis, low blood sugar, and serious allergic reactions. And then some of them will give you kidney problems. And some of them will also hurt the eyes, gallbladder problems, and so on. So that's not the excuse, though. The people who promote these drugs, they focus on highbrow science. They don't tell you that the reason this works, just like the reason low-carb diets work, is they make you sick. And you get so sick you can't eat. Well, what they say is that it changes hormones that are related to satiety, and it slows the stomach from emptying and increases gastric volume. These are the excuses. Somehow that's supposed to sound sexy or real scientific, but they work by making you sick. And people who have a history of thyroid problems aren't supposed to take these drugs at all. Big business. It's projected in 2027, just around the corner, that this will be a nearly $7 billion a year business. And it's resulted in various companies being developed that will give you telemedicine doctor consultations. In other words, you just call up on the phone, you talk to their doctors, and the doctors prescribe the medication. And I've never seen you. They've only had an internet visit. And then these same businesses will sell you the drugs at initially a reduced price, but pretty soon you're going to be paying the full $1,000 or $1,400 a month for them. Plan on it. Anyway, they're really popular. You know it because you see your friends, you hear about celebrities and billionaires taking these kind of medications to lose the weight. The newest drug just came out. It's Mounjaro. You'll be hearing a lot about that because it's just about to be approved. It's not yet approved. And it results in even a greater weight loss. Instead of 16% of your body weight being lost, they claim as much as 22% of your body weight will be lost by a drug that's more powerful. And I have no doubt in telling you that it's going to make you sicker than the other drugs. And that's why you're going to have better effects in terms of weight loss. The higher the dose, the more intense the symptoms. That's the way it is. Now let's take a look at something called the plateau phenomena. I want you to pay attention to this chart here on the left. This is the body weight, the percent of change that takes place. You see the light gray line is the placebo. On the placebo, they lost weight too because these people are asked, all of them in these studies, are asked to cut back on their calorie intake by 500 calories. So just that instruction alone causes you to lose weight. And by the way, all the research papers that have been done and published have been paid for by the respective pharmaceutical company industry. They're paid by the drug industries. Anyway, there's something that happens that I think you should be aware of, and that's called the plateauing phenomenon. And this is the result of one weekly injection of semaglutide compared to placebo. And you see the real weight loss that occurs. A month, you've lost considerable weight, 3 months, a lot of weight, yeah. And then you get up to 68 weeks, which is about 1.3 years, okay? 68 weeks, 17 months. You've been on the diet, and guess what happens? You stop losing weight. It's called the plateauing effect. And so as you follow these people out, after 68 weeks, you stop losing weight. Here they've studied them up to 104 weeks and further, and you don't lose any more weight. You've gone 36 weeks without losing weight. They stop working, the plateauing effect. So as a result, you went from, on average, 233 pounds. That's the baseline weight on average of the people who were involved in the experiment. 233 pounds, they dropped to 196 pounds. And to get that 37-pound weight loss, it cost them $250 a week, $1,000 a month, $1,400 a month in some estimates. Something new is being reported is kind of interesting, and that is Ozempic face. It's made a lot of national headlines, as it should, because the reason you're losing weight is to become more attractive. You're to improve your personal appearance. That's why you're losing the weight. And if it ends up resulting in you looking old and exhausted, at the end of the weight loss experience, costing you $17,000 to get there, That's what it costs for 68 weeks of therapy. After $17,000, you end up with a face that you're ashamed to show. And this occurs because of the rapid weight loss. When people lose weight on most diets, not on the McDougall diet, but on most diets, what happens is the skin is loose, it sags. They're eating a diet that makes them turn sallow, gray, because they're in cyanosis. They're cyanotic. They have blue blood cells. Okay, so they get a gray, bluish face. Whereas, of course, red blood cells cause you to look pink, don't they? You're in the pink. And, that's one of the reasons that when you follow our kind of program, you don't get an Ozempic face. You would get what I'd call a McDougall face, which is because of improved circulation to your skin, you're in the pink. You have, just like women put rouge on their face, because of this pinkish reddish color is attractive. You end up with pink looking skin. You turn from blue to pink. And, everything about you looks healthier. So don't plan on getting that type of problem with the McDougall diet. Anyway, fat fills out the face, takes care of some of the wrinkles. When you lose the fat, that's a problem, particularly when you're on these kind of rapid weight loss programs that use powerful drugs that make you so sick that you end up losing 37 pounds. And the way they treat this, by the way, once you develop this Ozempic face, they treat it with fillers, in other words, injections of silicone and similar materials. And it costs you $5,000 to $10,000. And they do deep plane facelifts at $75,000 and fat transfers at $8,000 to $12,000 for that operation. You see, you thought you were just getting yourself into a treatment of taking a shot a day or a couple shots a day or once a week and losing some weight because you didn't have to go hungry because you're so sick, you don't feel the hunger. And it was pretty much effortless on your part. All you had to do was inject yourself. And of course, it's high tech, it's from the doctors, from the scientists, from the medical business. So it's got to be good, right? All right, let's talk about another way that is popular for people to lose weight. And that is by bariatric surgery. Bariatric surgery. These are various ways to change the intestinal tract, to create malabsorption, and to cause the intestinal tract to be filled up, or to reduce the size of the intestinal tract. Like, for example, fillers. They put balloons inside the stomach that are blown up, that occupy space in the stomach. And there are little balloons and big balloons and pellets and all kinds of things that have been stuck in the stomach to cause you to fill up the stomach and therefore to lose weight because there's no room. But you're still hungry. You're just as hungry. Or there's been, because they haven't applied anything systemic. It's just been a local effect, filling the stomach, not the whole body changes that take place when you change to a healthy diet or you take some of these medications. So anyways, there are fillers, there are reductions where they change the size of the stomach, and then there are bypasses where they bypass some of the intestine. You're in a category where you get to have this kind of surgery if you run a BMI, which puts you into the morbid obesity class of nearly 40%. And I have to point out, just to be fair, because it's true, with any weight loss program, you see benefits. Even with the low-carb diets, you see a reduction in blood sugar and blood pressure. You see benefits just because of the weight loss. And so as a result of the weight loss that occurs with these various types of bariatric surgery, there's been documented decrease in risk of coronary artery disease and overall death at a serious price. Let's talk about the forerunner of intestinal bypass surgery performed in an operating room. This is a kind of bypass that takes place as a consequence of a tapeworm. A tapeworm, you just eat this worm, You swallow it, it grows, and any food you eat ends up bypassing your system and going into the tapeworm. This was very popular in the 1900s, between 1830 and 1900. They used to advertise infecting yourself with a tapeworm. And some people have asked, well, how do you get the tapeworm to come out? Well, they tell me what they used to do is they used to put a piece of food at the end opening of the intestinal tract and coax the little tapeworm to come out and bite the food and grab it. Anyway, here's an example of a 32-foot long tapeworm that is somehow supposed to help somebody lose weight. But I still want to point out to you, you're satisfying the needs of a tapeworm, but you're still hungry. You've done nothing to change the hunger apparatus. Here's another way of bypassing the system that doesn't involve bariatric surgery, and that's with orlistat. Do you remember orlistat? Yeah, orlistat is a drug that you swallow, and it prevents fat from being absorbed to the body, so the fat stays in the intestinal tract. And fat in the intestinal tract causes diarrhea, and explosive diarrhea, and anal leakage. But you end up bypassing the absorption of nutrients into your system as a consequence of taking this drug. You poison your intestinal tract so that the enzymes that cause fat to be digested and remnants of fat to be brought into the system are paralyzed. They don't work. And weight loss is 4 to 7 pounds a year. Not a popular drug, to say the least. And you also, because you've not only bypassed nutrients and calories, you've also bypassed the absorption into your body of various vitamins and minerals. So there's concern about various vitamin and mineral deficiencies that occur with this kind of bypassing the normal intestinal absorption. All right, here's an example of somebody who went through real serious gastric bypass, where they cut open the stomach and make some serious rearrangements. There's Al Roker in BC, Weathercaster, and his information is public. I mean, he brags about it. He brags about how much trouble he has dealing with his hunger drive, and he's been through a lot. He started out over 300 pounds. Then he went through intestinal bypass surgery, lost 100 pounds, and then he started gaining weight. Why? Because of the intensity of hunger. And hunger doesn't go away after these surgeries. And so what he had to do was he had to introduce in 2018 a low-carb keto diet to make him sick enough so that he could depress his hunger drive. And I was just watching him last night on the news. He needs more help. He's starting to regain his weight. He hasn't dealt with the problem, and he could. If he understood the things that we understood, he could. Can you imagine going through all that surgery, fillers, restrictions, and bypasses at the expense and the discomfort and the risk, and still being hungry? So the average weight loss is 60 to 100 pounds, but 10 to 20% of people regain a significant amount of their lost weight, even after you've done all this extensive rearrangements on them. And it costs like $7,000 to $33,000, and most insurance companies will pay for it, but they have to approve it first. That's new in my lifetime. When this surgery just became popular, say 30, 40 years ago, the insurance companies wouldn't pay for it, but they do these days. And within 2 years, half the patients have regained some weight, maybe not their original weight, but some weight. And the thing to notice, and I've said this several times, and I'll repeat it again, is with weight loss, you get improvements in general health. For one thing, the bariatric surgery business can claim that 77% of patients are able to completely resolve type 2 diabetes. And 86% improve their diabetes. In other words, it was almost 100% cure of type 2 diabetes. But any program that causes you to lose weight will get the same results. If you go on the Atkins diet, you'll get the same results. You have bypass surgery, you have your teeth wired together, you get the same results. This is why I can easily claim and be confident in my beliefs that if you follow the McDougall diet, you have a 100% chance of resolving type 2 diabetes with associated weight loss. But the difference with the McDougall diet is you're doing something that causes good health, makes you feel well, gives you a chance to enjoy your food, contrary to what you do in any other method to lose weight. Let's take a look at these procedures in a little more detail. We have adjustable gastric banding. There's a good one. There's a band put around your stomach, and there's a tube that goes from the band, which goes to a pump, which they implant under your skin. And you go to the doctor's office, and if you want to lose more weight faster, what they do is they pump up this bag and increase the tightness of the gastric band around your stomach, and you will lose more weight. You'll become more miserable too, but you'll lose more weight. And you're still hungry. Haven't done anything with a hunger drive. This is a restrictive type of procedure. And then we have the kind of procedure that eliminates part of the intestinal tract through surgery. This is called the gastric sleeve. And you see what they've done is they've cut the fundus of the stomach off, removed it. A good share of your stomach's gone. You're left with this tiny pouch that's barely the size of the rest of your intestinal tract, called the gastric sleeve. Still hungry. Or you can go through a more extensive surgery called the Roux-en-Y gastric bypass. This is a big deal. What they do is they take your esophagus, and actually a small part of your initial stomach, and they attach that to your small intestine and bypass a whole bunch of the small intestine. It's basically cut out of the flow of food. And the more intestinal tract they leave out, the more severe the weight loss will be. And so the surgeon has to make a judgment at the time of the operation how much he's going to isolate of the intestinal tract, a part of the intestinal tract that no longer will absorb food. This is a big deal. I've seen a few patients that have undergone this kind of surgery, and I've seen a few patients die from it. Interestingly, just to review on the last two popular weight loss programs, that's taking the Ozempic type drugs, the Gila monster venom type drugs, and gastric bypass surgery, bariatric surgery. Those procedures have become so popular, so accepted, that the American College of Pediatrics just last month told doctors around the world that it's okay to start giving these children the GLP-1 agonists, the weight loss shots. They're generally shots at age 12. And it's okay to do intestinal bypass surgery, bariatric surgery, when a child reaches the age of 13. And in the discussion of this recommendation by the American Academy of Pediatrics, one of the spokespeople for this particular recommendation for the American College of Pediatrics, he came out and said this: obesity is not a lifestyle problem. It's not a lifestyle disease. It predominantly emerges from biologic factors. In other words, it's your fault. You either have a stomach too big for your body, or you're an obsessive compulsive overeater, or you don't exercise enough. One way or another, it's your fault. Or maybe it's your genes. In this case, they say it's your genes. And so you can't change them. This offered people around the world, and particularly children, no real opportunity to get their health back. Our children, one of the most important criterion for a society is that civilized people protect their children. You can do all kinds of things to adults and consider it okay, but not children. We've allowed them to become obese. That's the original sin. And then we subject them to treatments that are potentially harmful and only temporary. I guess bariatric surgery can be more on the permanent side, but once you stop these drugs, you regain the weight. And, people who have the intestinal bypass surgery, like the bariatric surgery, like Al Roker, they figure out ways to get around it because they're still hungry. The people who go through these surgeries with malabsorption being created, these people learn to blend their food, turn it into liquids, and eat a whole bunch of times during the day so they can end up satisfying their hunger. And by the way, their doctors, when they complain about post-surgery hunger, they tell them to eat foods like we recommend on the McDougall diet. Why? Because the potato is the most satisfying food available. And they need to see if their patients stop complaining about being hungry all the time. The problem, we might as well get to it right now. It's due to overconsumption of the wrong foods. Too much fat, too many calories. And what chance do our children or anybody have in our society when industry works as hard as they can to give you as much fat and as many calories as possible for at least the least cost possible? You have IHOP stuffing cheese to your pancakes, giving you a stack of pancakes at 1,360 calories, 36% fat. Taco Bell, they have a meal, their cravings box, which cheap, $5, 1,150 calories, 47% fat. Pizza, when I would eat pizza with cheese many, many, many years ago, I wouldn't eat just one slice, I'd eat 3 or 4 slices. And you're talking about 1,240 calories and 34% fat, those calories are. And McDonald's, their newest invention, selling to the public is McDonald's land, sea, and air burger. It wouldn't take you long to figure out what it provides. It provides a layer of beef, a layer of chicken, a layer of fish. The land, sea, and air burger. 1,330 calories, nearly 50% fat. What chance do the kids have? Rich foods make you sick. And not only do we make the foods at our fast food restaurants as rich as possible and as inexpensive as possible, we even have products that reflect the remnants of eating of aristocrats of royalty, like Imperial Margarine, Dairy Queen, and Burger King. They don't even try and hide it. Let's talk about the way we approach the problem. We feed people food as much as they want. And one of the things about the McDougall diet, if you're hungry, you're not doing the program. And so we have nearly 4,000 recipes for you to choose from. But as I've told you many times before, you do better if you make it simple. You have the same thing for breakfast every day. You have a couple different choices for lunch every day. And every night for dinner, you have 3 or 4 different items that you have. In our home, we start out with oatmeal and fruit in the morning. We'll have leftovers often for lunch, and for dinner, it's things like bean burritos and a rice dish with maybe a little tofu, spaghetti and marinara sauce, baked potatoes, and sweet potatoes, not served at the same meal, are often favorites of ours. We just have a repertoire of maybe 6 different dishes that we rotate over and over again. And I encourage you to do the same. The program works. It's scientifically established, uncontested research that we published on our program. In a 7-day experiment that we did on over 1,700 people, is we found that in 7 days, they lost on average 3.1 pounds. That's okay, but losing weight for 7 days is something lots of programs can accomplish. The real test is what happens over long term. what happens when people permanently change the way they eat? Well, the average weight loss in a study that was performed by Oregon Health and Science University, in other words, the medical school in Portland, found in a year, the average weight loss was 19.1 pounds. And this is studying participants that weren't interested in losing weight. They had other interests based on multiple sclerosis. But still, the weight loss in these people who were younger than our average patient was 19.1 pounds in a year. And then a program done in New Zealand, totally independent of us, the Oregon Health and Science University Portland program was independent of us. We didn't have hardly any influence in that program at all. We had absolutely no influence on the program that was done in New Zealand, called the BROAD program, the BROAD study, where the average weight loss, and they claim to have the record. They even say it's better than the McDougall diet. But of course, they used the McDougall diet. It says so in the paper. It was 25.3 pounds in a year. That's pretty good. And it satisfies hunger. We know that. One of our earliest findings was this, based on a food frequency questionnaire. We determined what people ate. And we did a randomized control trial where we took half the people and we asked them not to change their diet for a year. These are the dots represented in red. And then we took other half of people and we had them go through our program, through our exact program that we teach for 10 or 12 days. And the results of their dietary change is represented in the green. They dropped their fat intake from about 40% down to around 10 to 15%. And they maintained it for a year. Anything you do for more than 6 months is considered permanent. Now, why were they so compliant? Well, it's because of the results. Not only did they lose weight, but there were so many other positive things that happened to them, all the way from relief of indigestion to getting off their diabetic medications. And they liked the food. They really liked the food, as everybody could and should. McDougallers, they have one consistent thing they'll tell you. They eat as much as they want. If you're hungry, you're not doing the diet. You're not doing our program. You can plan on long-term success and never being hungry again. Now, this is in distinction to other programs like Nutrisystem and Jenny Craig, Weight Watchers. They'll do their ads and they'll show you somebody who's lost weight. Very impressive change, to say the least. But then they tell you the results are not typical. Don't expect these results. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you, you should expect these results. If you follow the program, you're going to get these results. Doug Lerner reports never being hungry. And he lost 140 pounds. Diabetes went away. Cholesterol dropped 100 points. Bad cholesterol dropped 80 points. Blood sugar became normal. Ran in the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. He loves the program. Been on it for years. He'd never change. He'd never go back. That's one thing I can pretty consistently tell you. I can consistently tell you, not pretty consistently. I can tell you, people who learn the program, do the program, then stop looking around for other ways to get their health back and lose weight. There's no need. They understand. They know why it works. It works. It's comfortable. Fits in with their lifestyle. Cuts their food bill. Takes care of every aspect of their health, including their body odor. Beth, she actually teaches in our 12-day program. And she got tremendous results. She went from 198 pounds to 152 pounds. She feels great. All aspects of her body, from inflammation to her mood, improved dramatically by simply going on the McDougall program. And she's been on it for a few months, almost a year now, maybe a little longer. But she's very pleased with the results. May of 2022 to October of 2022. These are the results that she's gotten. So a few months. Thomas McCarthy, he reports never being hungry either. He went to the McDougall program initially in 2013, but he didn't implement it fully. This is the live-in program. This is the Santa Rosa program. This is the resort-based program. This is where people came for 10 days, and we took care of them personally, and we fed them. You know, full dining room, food's all cooked, done well. He didn't do well. Not as well as he did when he came back in September of 2020 and took the telemedicine program. And he says, as everybody says, that's been through both programs, the telemedicine program's better. Get better results, better compliance. You learn everything in your own home. You don't have to leave the resort and go home and start over again. So we've solved a lot of problems with our program by going from live to internet. It's a better program. Fred Ford, he lost. He went from 350 to 250 pounds, and took him about a year. Never hungry. Loves his food, loves his results. And we have Jean, G, and she lost 23 pounds. But she didn't have that much to lose. Let's take a look at this program worldwide. All right. Well, I've spent a lot of time telling you about the hunger drive. Started out with the Minnesota starvation experience and what these men went through over 11 months of going on a semi-starvation program. Are you ready for a lesson? Are you ready to figure out what hunger is all about? You don't have to wait 11 months to do this. You can do it in a weekend. We did it. Mary and I did it in the 1980s. We were involved in a small congregation. And at that time, every newscast had stories about starving children in Africa. And we heard all of this news, and it was preached during our time at the congregation about the suffering that went on. And of course, you know me, or some of you do. My response was, well, you know, let's show some empathy for these people. Let's go hungry. And so what I proposed is that we not eat for the weekend. And what I'm recommending to you or suggesting to you is you might try this too, just to see how powerful the hunger drive is. And so we stopped eating on Friday night. No big deal. I figure it's just only a few hours. Now, this will be no difficulty at all. And Saturday morning, I started thinking about food more frequently, a lot. And by Saturday afternoon, I was thinking about food all the time. And by Saturday evening, I had no more money problems. I wasn't worried about World War III. There's nothing on my mind except for food. A hungry person can only see food. And I accomplished that in 24 hours. And the plan was on Sunday, we'd get together and have a meal similar to what you'd eat in Africa. And so Mary put together a meal of green salad, lentil stew, flatbread, and rice. It was the best dinner we ever had. I assure you, it was the tastiest, most enjoyable meal we ever had. I'll never forget that. I'll never forget the intensity of that drive. And you can discover the same if you want to do it. Just don't eat for a weekend. If you're ill or you're a child, I don't recommend doing this. So we have a program that I believe represents the diet of what human beings are supposed to consume. It's just like there's a diet for cats and a diet for birds, a diet for cows and horses, et cetera, and for Gila monsters. And I believe that the McDougall diet, a starch-based diet with fruits and vegetables, is that diet. If you eat the kind of diet that I'm recommending, the diet that 99.999% of the people who ever walk this earth have consumed. You know, if you go by history, the human history of a million years of existence, then you find that, 100 billion people ate the McDougall diet. It's been well tested. And so if you have come to a similar conclusion that I've come to, then my question for you is, why not give in? Why don't realize what you're supposed to eat and then eat it and then satisfy your hunger drive? Why keep fighting it? I realize most of this audience is not in that situation, but your friends are, your relatives are. They do everything they can except switch to a starch-based diet with fruits and vegetables. They take shots that make you sick. They take pills that depress your appetite. They'll even starve and suffer pain rather than just eating food. Just like every animal in the kingdom, they were never intended to be hungry, and they're not, as long as there's, a good season of food. They're never hungry. They're never overweight either. So it should be with us. Is if we eat the diet that's supposed to be for us, we ought to be able to win the battle of the bulge and win over illness. It really is that simple. I would like to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. That was great. Lots of participation in the chat, lots of people talking and just giving thanks for how much weight they've lost, how successful they've been.
Oh, good. Well, I'm sure they look around to their friends and relatives, and just like I do, he goes, how sad. I can see why you're overweight, sick. Every place you go, restaurants, meetings, and people you see on TV, and a good share of the people who are actors in commercials these days, they're not trim anymore. The advertisements are talking to the customer who's overweight. And that's the kind of actors that they hire these days, are overweight actors. I mean, it's an epidemic. It's more than an epidemic. It's almost the norm is to be overweight and sick, when 80% of people are in that category. There's something terribly wrong. Either there's something terribly wrong with the human being and its design, or there's something else that's terribly wrong. And I think I can easily present to you that it's the food. It's plain and simple, the food. And you fix the food, you get on with all the other wonderful things in life, like your family, your hobbies, and your business, and your sports. And you really, really add quality to the rest of your life. You don't have to spend time going to the doctor's office for shots and post-op visits after surgery, and all kinds of other nonsense.
Well, it's tough because there's so much misinformation out there. So hopefully you've dispelled lots of the myths and taught people what the ideal diet is for health and ultimately weight loss. Well,
you've been with me on this trip in one way or another for well over 40 years, Heather. And there have been times when I thought that it's hopeless that people are never going to get it. And then when I turn around, they're in worse shape than ever. And so I've seen that the pendulum is heading in the wrong direction. But I feel different about things now. And the reason I feel different about it is because of our ability to communicate. 86% of people in the world have access to some kind of device, a phone, an iPad, a computer, where they can communicate with each other. 86% of the people. And it's possible that a message like this could go, what do they say, viral. It could just spread, and I think it will. I think people are frustrated enough with the dishonesty, the failures, the suffering that they're going through, that a bulk of the population, certainly not everybody, but a bulk of the population is going to say, hey, I get it, and move on with their lives. There, for so many reasons, we have to do this.
Well, there are a few questions that came in while you were talking, but again, most of it was just people sharing stories of how well they've done. Let's see. Beth had a question about all the talk about flax, chia, hemp seeds being important for your omega-3s. How does that affect or interfere with weight loss?
Well, remember that fat you eat is the fat you wear. And fat doesn't satisfy the hunger drive, and these seeds are 80% fat. And the more processed they are, if you'd like to turn them into ground flaxseed or flaxseed oil, the worse the problem becomes as far as weight gain and also the potency of the drug. As a berry or a seed, it's a food. When you start processing it, you turn it into an oil. At best, it's a medication. At worst, it's a serious toxin. So if we're talking about the whole seed, it is sold with the idea that it has omega-3 fats. It does. So the rest of the plant kingdom, it has omega-3 fats. But what isn't true is they tell you you have to resort to these high-fat, high-calorie foods, nuts, seeds, avocados, and so on, to be healthier. That's not true. There's plenty of omega-3 fats in rice. 5% or 8% of the calories of rice are fat. And of those calories, half of them are omega-3 fats, or omega-6 fats is the other kind of essential fat. So the plant kingdom is loaded with omega-3s. In fact, only plants can make omega-3s. No animal can do it. No fish does it. The way fish gets omega-3 is it eats seaweed or algae. So the idea that you need to eat these super concentrated superfoods to be healthier is not true. And in fact, you have to pay a price for them, at least in some forms. And one of those prices will be the fat you eat, the fat you wear. But otherwise, it's a rather innocuous recommendation outside of you spending your money on wisely and making some supplement salesman happy.
Thank you. Ashish is wondering why they don't feel hungry at the moment they're underweight.
Who doesn't feel hungry underweight?
A person that's participating in the call. They didn't clarify whether they were following a starch-based diet or not, but they don't seem to have a hunger drive. What would you suggest?
Well, hunger is ceaseless. It is a drive, as I started out in the first slide, that is designed for you to satisfy your need for calories. And it never misses, except if you try and satisfy it with the wrong kind of food. Just like let me go back to this story, this analogy. We have 3 drives that keep us alive. We have lots of drives. We have the drive for sex, the drive for money, the drive for position in business. These are drives we kill for, and people do. There are only 3 drives that keep us alive. And they're the drive called breath, the drive called thirst, and the drive called hunger. So I ask you, how many of you count on your breathing drive to get enough air in? Do you count the number of breaths you take a minute? The same thing with your need for satisfying thirst. Do you count the glasses of liquid that you drink every day? Or do you just rely on your thirst drive? I bet you rely on your thirst drive. And so the third drive is just as well designed. All you have to do is give it what it needs. Like when it comes to breath, people answer the question of breath by saying air. It's not right. Any mixture of gases that you call air won't do it if you leave oxygen out. It's oxygen that satisfies the breath drive. And when it comes to the thirst drive, you may think of alcohol, doesn't satisfy thirst, guarantee it. And the only reason beer satisfies thirst or juice is because it's made with water. It's water that satisfies the thirst drive. And when it comes to hunger, if you say food satisfies my hunger drive, the answer is wrong. It's the carbohydrate. As mentioned in one of the slides that I told you, the body is indifferent to you consuming fat. It doesn't even notice it. It doesn't register with your hunger drive when you eat fat. It registers when you eat carbohydrate because that's your intended food. So the mechanisms that have been designed over 400 million years of evolution have designed a perfect hunger drive, breath drive, and thirst drive to keep you and the whole species alive. Mother Nature doesn't make mistakes. God is not so unkind, you may put it that way. It's done correctly. The problem we have is that we have choice. Isn't choice the original sin? It is, isn't it? Choice. So when it comes to breath, you only have one choice. When it comes to thirst, you only have one choice. When it comes to food, you can choose, things from beef to roast beef, to broccoli, to chicken, and carrots, potatoes. You got 6,000 things to choose from. And with the information that's coming across and the lies that are being told, you don't stand a chance unless you take the trouble to do the research yourself, which I've tried to make available for you, either or by providing the scientific references in everything I write and the scientific references in the presentations I give. And I've shown you where on Sci-Hub that you can get these studies, a complete study, free. No effort at all. Just plug in and grab this study. I do it all day long. It's a tremendous resource of information. So you need to just become more educated. But getting back to your question, why are you not hungry? Well, because you're eating enough food. And you're certainly eating enough carbohydrate. If you're eating a high-fat diet, you'd be hungry, or a low-calorie diet, not enough food, until you went into ketosis. And then once you go into ketosis, you're so sick, you're not hungry anymore. Or until you go on one of these pills or shots that suppress your hunger drive and making you sick. But I have to point out again and again, if you go through bariatric surgery, you're still hungry. You're starving. You're miserable. Why wouldn't you be? You've just played tricks on your body to make it so that you can't eat enough. You've been physically deformed to the point where you can't eat even though you're hungry. So, again, my answer is give in. Give in to your hunger. Eat, but know what you're supposed to eat, which is a starch-based diet. How much starch? 90% of your food should be starch, with the addition of fruits and vegetables. And if you decide you want to have a treat, piece of birthday cake on your birthday, or turkey at Thanksgiving, hey, the body's tough. This is not a religion. It's a matter of learning a set of rules that gives you the best chance possible to live the life you want. If you decide you want to, let's look at it this way. Once you know this, you can pick the days you're well, and you can pick the days you're ill.
Absolutely. Next question. This is from John. He needs some clarification on the ad libitum. There seems to be a difference of opinion amongst the McDougall group. So what do you like to tell people?
Ad libitum. Eat without restriction. Eat as much as you want, but the right foods. So yes, you should be eating ad libitum. It goes back to what I just tried to explain. The hunger drive is not wrong. It's there and designed to give you the right amount of energy, when fortunately the right nutrients go with that energy package, so that you are in good health and you are trim and you're active and you're best fit for survival. The hunger drive is so efficient. It's allowed the Homo sapien to exist for nearly a million years. And the hominoids, the pre-human primates, to live for 4 million years. Why would it be wrong now? It's got us through all these tough times, a lot tougher than most of us are going through now. The body's designed perfectly. There are no mistakes. Mistakes are all left behind. They're naturally selected out. They're gotten rid of, the mistakes are. It's the way life is.
So I want to challenge you a bit, Dad. I think there's a bit of a difference between like comfortably full and gorging.
Yeah.
And so I like to tell people to eat until they're comfortably full, because there is a point where you can cross that line into overeating and uncomfortable. And we don't want people to do that.
We don't want people to do that. But, I don't think that happens very often, Heather. I mean, they're uncomfortable. Why would they continue to be in that pain? Doesn't make sense. You eat ad libitum, in other words, to the full satisfaction of your appetite. Doesn't mean, and there are people who have psychiatric issues. There are people who are over drinkers of water. I've heard about them, never seen them. All my medical training, I've heard about people who drink so much water every day that they dilute their system out. They get sick because they take in more water than they need. Sure, you can do that. Hyperventilators, people who breathe too much. What happens when you hyperventilate? You get dizzy, lightheaded, and faint. In other words, boy, you get sick. So, if you're talking about overeating being something that makes you uncomfortable or makes you ill, that's not ad libitum. Ad libitum is on your own free will to eat as much as you choose. If you choose to be sick, that's okay. You choose to be in pain because you're overstuffed, I guess that's okay. You're over 21. But no, I don't know. I do see the distinction between uncomfortably overeating and eating ad libitum.
Great. Thank you.
But seriously, how would you feel about taking, you're supposed to take in 18 breaths a minute. What if you took in 40 breaths a minute? What do you think would happen if you took in 40 breaths a minute?
You'd probably pass out, right?
You'd be huffing and puffing and faint and fall over. What if you drank like 25 gallons of water a day? In addition to being in the bathroom all day long, you could get to the point where you have a hemodilution. In other words, the blood is actually thinned out by all that water. But good grief, you'd have to do something so extreme. And yes, you can overeat. Why would you overeat? I don't know. I guess maybe you think, look at these men that we talked about, the hyperphagia they went through after they were allowed to have food. They overate, but they stopped overeating, not when they got the amount of fat back to their previous level, but when they got back their free fatty mass. And then they stopped overeating. Hyperphagia that occurs after this kind of starvation, I believe, is due to psychological pain that occurred during starvation. The body's thinking to itself, my goodness, I just went through 6 months of semi-starvation. I better get prepared for the next famine. And yeah, you have an overeating phase under those circumstances. So I would have to say, I'd have to look for, if somebody told me they consistently overate, I don't just mean one Thanksgiving dinner. If somebody told me they overate every day, I'd have to ask why. Why do you do that? I mean, did you just starve for 16 months? I mean, were you raised in a situation during a global recession like my parents went through, when they had nothing to eat but potatoes and turnips? When they went through the Great Depression of the 20s? Maybe some people afterwards, they do. People who go through starvation programs are afraid of not having enough food. They could overeat, but that's not normal. And that's not the way life's supposed to be. That's a reaction to a very stressful event, as you saw in these people.
Great. Thank you for clarifying. Okay, I think that's it for questions. It's 12 o'clock. That was great. I learned so much, as I always do when I listen to you, Dad. Dr. McDougall, thank you.
Well, that was a new presentation, and you were the first ones to hear it. And I look forward to giving it again. And thank you for attending. We're going to do it. We're going to do something similar next Monday on Chef AJ's show, and it'll be up on YouTube too. Either this presentation or the one on Monday, depending on which one works out well. Better.
Which one's better?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll post one of them on our YouTube channel in a few days.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for watching and for being here. Thanks again, Dr. McDougall, Dad.